Hey everybody, it's ShadowStar here for my ranking of Series 4 of Modern Doctor Who. And first and foremost, this was a really difficult series to rank. Why? Because Series 4 is just so perfect. All the episodes have mostly good qualities, and it was just such a difficult back and forth figuring out which episodes go where in my list. Before I even get into the list, let me just remind everyone. There is no such thing as a bad Series 4 episode. Every episode is all good. Like, honestly, even the 10th position episode is a great episode. But let's get on with it already. In 10th position is Midnight. I still very much like Midnight, and it's very creepy at times. I do think the people on the bus can get quite annoying at times, but I still quite enjoy it. A really underrated scene I always enjoy is before everything goes nuts. It's like when the Doctor says, "Oh, we have to talk to each other," and you get a little scene of him like socializing with everybody that's on the bus. It's a really nice little moment. And then of course you get the creepy bit, and obviously it's a tremendously well acted episode too, because those actors have to remember those lines and sync them up, and there's no special effects. That's just, there's barely any special effects in the episode. It's just the actors being amazing. So that's that episode. Moving on to ninth position is Sontaran's Stratagem and the Poison Sky. By Series 4 standards, it's a bit more average, but it's still a great episode. It's got Martha back, and Martha, I like the fact that they since Martha already had her season, they kind of split Martha up. It's like she spends half the episode as a clone, but still, it is nice to see Martha and Donna interact and have those small scenes between them so Martha can kind of tell Donna what everything is like. Wilf's in this episode, and he gets to have some great scenes, of course. The Sontarans actually do a very well job as the villain, which is great. All the side characters are pretty good in this episode. It's nice to have, I suppose it's the first and probably one of the rare episodes where we have a focus on Unit in the modern series, which is great. So yeah, the Sontarans did a great job, and I even enjoy side characters like Luke Radigan. He kind of redeemed himself in the end, and it's fun seeing him in the mix as well. So yeah, the Sontaran episode was great too. Moving on to 8th position, we have Planet of the Ood. It's still a great episode, and the music is really creepy. There's this scene where they're in the cage, and other scenes where you can kind of always hear the Song of the Ood in the background, even when you don't think about it. It's really well done, and it kind of pays off the Ood too, because, I love the Satan Pit, but one of the most underutilized parts of that episode was the Ood, so it's a great episode to kind of focus on them and go more into it, especially since, some people would criticize the Satan Pit and say, oh, the Ood were slaves and the Doctor didn't do much about it. Well, here, at least we get to focus on it, and I like to even have a line in that episode where the Doctor says, I wanted to do more, but I was distracted by the devil. I like that moment, so yeah, it's a great episode, and obviously it introduces us to the Ood who will play a part in the last episode with 10, so yeah. Moving on, we have a episode, the 7th position, Unicorn and the Wasp, and completely, utterly underrated episode. A lot of people don't give this episode credit because, a lot of the episodes in this season are huge episodes, but that's what I like about this episode. It's not a giant crazy episode like a lot of the other ones. It's a nice light-hearted episode where it's almost quite comedic in a lot of ways. I mean, that scene in the kitchen where the Doctor's been poisoned is one of the comedic highlights of 10 and Donner. It's just the comedic timing with those two is brilliant in that scene. And then, the accusatory scene where everything's being discussed is so brilliant, where we point to each person and, there's lots of little comedic moments with Donner in that scene. It's just, even though it's still a murder mystery, it's such a light-hearted episode that you just gotta love it, and sometimes you need that, sometimes you want to watch a random Doctor Who episode, and you don't want the crazy episodes with the emotions or the explosions. You want just a nice, fun episode to put on, and this is what that episode is. It's great. It's a nice, simple, casual episode you can put on without having to focus as much. Alright, let's get on to the 6th position, Partners in Crime, the first episode of the season, and it does a brilliant job. It's a lot like Unicorn and the Wasp, where compared to the rest of pretty much the rest of the season, it's got a lot of comedy in it with Donna coming back. Obviously, that scene where they first reunite is great. And then, there's a lot of good stuff in it. We get to introduce Wilf, who we'd already met. The villains, well, not the villains, I suppose, well, the aliens are just adorable. And that's the thing about this episode is, like, there's this scene where, like, there's adipose everywhere on the road, and, like, a car has to screech, and they put in sound effects to make it sound like the adipose got hit. It is the most heartbreaking thing. It's like, this is an episode where several people die. It's like, who cares? But the adipose get hit by a car. It's like, oh no! It's heartbreaking. You care so much about them. And as the Doctor says at the end, they're not the villains. Obviously, the one lady was. But even the Doctor admits, when the people weren't literally dying, it wasn't an awful plan. If the people never ended up dying, it wouldn't have been that horrible. Adipose get created, some people lose some fat. All in all, no one's really harmed until people started dying. So honestly, yeah, if people didn't interfere, it might have got a bit better. But still, it's a great and obviously the ending scene where, like, they fly past Wilf and Donna waves goodbye, that's a great scene too. Moving on, we have another big one. It's Fires of Pompeii. There's a lot of great moments in this episode. Obviously, people highlight it for having Capaldi in the episode. And obviously the ending is great where he decides to save them and Donna having to realize how horrible these events can be. But there's a really underrated scene that people will overlook, especially on first watch, when they first meet that other soothsayer guy. And there's a lot of both him and the daughter predicting stuff, and there's some foreshadowing, like them saying there's something on your back to Donna, or saying she is returning, and so on. There's a lot of good moments in that scene, and obviously the decision the Doctor has to make, and then obviously what follows is great, and yeah, that's just, from the moment the volcano goes up, that's a whole emotional scene, and those are the highlight scenes. There's a few other scenes that are not as much stand out, but who doesn't love Fires of Pompeii for the ending? Alright, like I said, it's tricky. It is so tricky to figure out where these placements are, and I always feel bad when things aren't higher up. Moving on, we have Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. Oh boy, it's Moffat's time to shine. By this point, Moffat knew he was going to be showrunner, and oh boy, did he start to put his footprint down already. It's the introduction of River Song, and, I mean, come on, who doesn't love River Song? And that's the crazy thing. I mean, people who've watched the show before love this episode because of all the references to things that call forward, but then you've got to think about this the first time you watch this, it's such a crazy experience. You feel such a connection to River, even though from both our and the Doctor's perspective, we've never met them before. They're just you could be fooled into thinking this is just the standard one-off character who comes into an episode and dies at the end, but she comes back. And even then, Alex Kingston didn't even know she was going to be coming back, but of course Moffat wanted to bring her back. So all the well-placed references are great. The only downside is, like, I would have put this higher, but I don't care so much for the virtual world stuff with Donna. And, there's a lot of times in these episodes where they have to kind of push Donna off to the side. And pretty much the entirety of the second episode, Forest of the Dead, Donna isn't with the Doctor. Because which makes sense, from the writing perspective, you need to have just the Doctor and River together to get all of that stuff out in the air. But still, and then of course the villains are pretty good too. There's a few dull moments, but most of all, everyone loves the villains. Everyone loves to freak out about Moffat doing that thing where let's not be afraid of the shadows. And then obviously you've got all the amazing stuff with River, and it's one of those times where an episode can be more emotional on a second watch through when it comes to River's death. It's crazy how that works. Alright, we just praised Moffat, now let's praise Russell T Davies. We've turned left, a utterly amazing culmination of Russell T Davies showing off everything that has happened throughout series 3 and 4. Turn left, it just shows how amazing Donna is, and, it's a great episode to highlight Donna's family too. Wilf's amazing, the mother isn't a good character, but it's great to see how well she's played, and obviously seeing what this different Donna goes through is great, and then just, seeing all the little references line up throughout Season 3 and see what happened without the Doctor there, and they even tie in little references to stuff like Sarah Jane and Torchwood doing stuff. It's a self-contained episode that sets up the finale, and yet it's just an incredible episode which just... it's such a self-contained story that manages to just show off Donna so well, highlight everything Russell has done, and set up the finale. Alright, you can't believe it's been this high, but I'm putting the Doctor's daughter this high, mainly because of how delightful a character she is. You actually get really upset when she dies, because you really believe it when the Doctor wants to take her with her, and she becomes such a delightful character. But also, the scenes where they're in that little jail cell, and the Doctor's talking about the Time Lords and Time War, and what it means, that's so good too. You get a lot of stuff with like that, and then of course you get the moment at the end with the line, "A man who never would." That's a great moment too. It's just crazy she's never made an appearance in the regular series. I know she's got audio adventures, but yeah, she's just a delightful character that... It's crazy. I mean, it's a compliment to the show where you can go from a character... You can go... In one whole episode, you go from a character who you've never met before to absolutely falling in love and thinking this is just a delightful character who really fits in. And speaking of which, this is something I've noticed with Series 4. Donna gets pushed to the side. Whether it's she's overshadowed because Martha comes back, she's overshadowed because Jenny's here, or River's here, or all the companions in the finale, Donna gets pushed aside despite being a great character. And of course, Martha was in this episode too, and she had some great scenes because, you might think, oh, she gets pushed aside because they get split up for most of the episode. But again, you need that because you need Jenny to have the focus. And I think Martha's little side story with the Hath and that one Hath who followed her around was such a nice, delightful tale too. So, you get some Martha scenes, Donna's great as a comedic moment, and then Jenny's just a delightful character. I honestly, I wanted to put this one near the top because I think it deserves more credit than it probably gets. Honestly, I don't know how a lot of people feel about Series 4. It's tricky. So, let's go with the obvious answer for the best episode. How could I not put the finale, Stolen Earth and Journey's End? Sure, the Daleks might be overdone, but, I mean, this is just... It's not just a finale. It's a crossover in every sense of the word. We bring back pretty much everyone who matters. Martha's already back. You bring back Sarah Jane, and Jack, and Torchwood, and Rose, and Mickey, and even Jackie. It's fun seeing Jackie here, of all people. She's like a regular companion now, but it's just an incredible non-stop story. I like the fact that the Doctor, of all people, gets pushed to the side and is stuck in the TARDIS for a while, so you get to see all the companions. The story isn't just, have the Doctor be amazing. Sure, it's the Doctor who does the solution in the end, but it's a story of what can the companions do? What can Torchwood do? What can Martha do on her own? What can Sarah Jane do? What can Jackie do? Everyone's got these little moments, every single one of them. It's fun seeing interactions and, that moment where everyone's calling each other on a video call is such a great scene too. Seeing all the little interactions with all the different characters, some of which have never really met, and, seeing Jack get to meet Martha again, although they'd met in Torchwood, and everything is just brilliant, and all the callbacks, and it's a true crossover, not just a literal crossover, but it feels like one of those amazing crossovers I watch in other shows where it's non-stop action, you want to see all the character interactions. And then you've got to talk about Dalek Khan. I remember when I first saw the trailer for this episode, and it ends on a Dalek laughing, I thought, oh, wow, this is so cool, because you never hear a Dalek like that, and I just love how insane and crazy he is. So, it's just, what more can I say? I could go on and on about every little interaction characters have, and the scene where, obviously, the scene where they're flying the TARDIS at the end, and everyone's there, and you see everyone cheering. Oh, that's just a great scene as well. Obviously, I'm not that fussed about the ending with Rose, but pretty much everything else. And of course, it's the proper ending of Donna as a companion. I love that scene where, the mother as serious and as doubt as problematic as she is, still has that good moment where she does compliment Donna as much as she can be cruel to the Doctor and Donna at times. So, there's just endless fun in this episode. Although this episode does have that huge cheat with the cliffhanger and the fake regeneration. But, I mean, like I said, I could go on and on about all the little interaction between Donna and Torchwood and Martha and Rose and everyone's here, and it's the Everybody's Here episode. Although there's a few specials afterwards, this episode was the climactic end to Russell T Davies' era. Not the literal end, he still wraps up with the specials, but this was the last episode of the final proper season he did. So yeah, it's just absolutely fun. And like I said, that's Series 4, and like I said, holy heck was this difficult to rank. Seriously, I had so much trouble. I'm looking at episodes on my list and I'm like, oh really, this is so low? But, none of them were bad. Usually when I do these lists, the first couple on my list, I'm like, all right, let's talk about the bad points. Here, I'm barely talking about the bad points. There almost isn't any. Every episode has highlight amazing scenes. There's literally not a bad episode that you want to skip. Anyway, I will eventually move on to Series 5 for my rankings. A series... my feelings on pretty much all the seasons going forward, especially the 11th Doctor seasons, are a lot more mixed and confused. So I will be very curious what I think about Series 5 when I rewatch it and put my episodes into an order. So I have no idea what I'm going to think, but eventually I'll do that ranking. Until then, see you next time, guys.